Okay, here we are. It's Wednesday, November 28th. We're heading to day 3 of the UN bribery trial. U.S. versus Ho. Sheikh Gadio on the stand. We covered yesterday Vuk Jeremic. It's been picked up in Serbia. Vuk Jeremic, who while he was PGA, while he was President of the General Assembly, was doing business for the China Energy Fund Committee, which late in the day by Sheikh Gadio, when he began with few other non-Hong Kong journalists in the House, said yes, the offer involved military equipment. He said that he didn't report the $2 million of cash in the boxes because he wanted to get paid, but also Idris Deby of Chad needed the help to fight Boko Haram. That's just what Paul Biya says. But the fact that a Chinese NGO, still accredited to the UN under Antonio Guterres, is offering military equipment to a 30-year president to hold down his own people says everything you need to know about Antonio Guterres. He's a friend of dictators and a censor of the press that asked him about it. A new low for the UN, because they've made mistakes before. Have you heard of Rwanda? Have you heard of Sri Lanka? But neither Kofi Annan nor Ban Ki-moon had a journalist beaten up and thrown out. No UN personalities down here. The UN is in denial of the corruption that Antonio Guterres has brought upon it. Shocking. Okay, here we are. It's Wednesday, November 28th, and the UN bribery trial of U.S. versus Patrick Ho has had its third day, second day of evidence. And the evidence involves Mr. Sheikh Gadio, former foreign minister of Senegal, testifying for over 2 hours. Troubling and shocking what he had to say. Number one, introduced to Patrick Ho by Vuk Jeremic, former PGA assistant in Trump World Tower. Number two, soon thereafter, setting up meetings with Idris Deby of Chad to look for the mysterious Block H oil contract. But it gets worse. The Chinese NGO, yes, the Chinese NGO still accredited to the UN under Antonio Guterres, was offering military equipment to Idris Deby of Chad, longtime coup leader, holding his people down militarily, offered not only military equipment, and today it got more specific. Today, Sheikh Gadio said they offered tanks and surveillance equipment, because when you're a dictator, you need surveillance equipment. And where best to get it except from a UN-accredited NGO? Big Tony's big friends, Patrick Ho. Patrick Ho, photographed with Idris Deby in a black tunic. Today he's in purple. Patrick Ho sitting at the bench talking to his defense counsel. Our interest here is, how could the UN not have yet done an audit of an NGO that's selling tanks to an African dictator? Absolutely shocking. They say the case has nothing to do with the UN because, I guess, hey, that's what the UN does, sell tanks to African dictators. Absolutely shocking. Now, there was some troubling testimony by Mr. Gadio that will, I think, preclude him from running for president in Senegal. What did he say? He complained to Patrick Ho. This is important. He complained to Patrick Ho that previously, in 2005, when Senegal, under his leadership, he claims, switched from recognizing Taiwan to recognizing China, he was extremely unhappy that he didn't get the money that he should have gotten. He said it in an email. It's a document in the case. He said the president of Senegal got millions of dollars from China, but never passed it on to him as foreign minister. And he says he complained to his Chinese counterparts. Now, that's what it says. Now, he's tried to say, and Mr. Zulkand of the prosecution tried to help him rehabilitate himself by saying he's not that's not him. Well, he wrote it. He's not really sure if the president took a bribe. The problem is not just that the ex-president took a bribe, it's that he wanted a bribe from China when he was foreign minister of Senegal. That's what he wrote. So I don't know. You know, he's a compelling witness. He's going to continue in the afternoon, and we're going to be there. But I don't know how you run for president of Senegal when you've complained in writing that you didn't get paid by your Chinese paymasters to switch from Taiwan to China. I don't know how it's possible. I don't think it is possible. Those of you in Senegal concerned with Mr. Gadio seeking a payment for the switch from Taiwan, you'll find it in the evidence file. in U.S. versus Patrick Ho. There's more, and yet there's more. Vuk Jeremic apparently threatening to sue Serbian media, but it wasn't just a one-off. His assistant, Dagmar, we'll get the name when we write an article, his assistant of Mr. Vuk Jeremic was intimately involved in setting up the trips of China Energy Fund Committee to Chad for the oil deal. So, I don't know, call it sustainable development or call it corruption. But I call it the UN is corrupt. A PGA working with an NGO accredited still to the UN to sell tanks to Idris Deby. The word Cameroon did come up in the trial, and we hope to have more. For now, we're going to go write a story. The UN is corrupt, and the trial shows it more and more. Okay, and we continue. Here, Wednesday, November 28th. Sheikh Gadio has admitted in writing in the past, and it was shown on the screen today, that he expected to get paid by China after switching Senegal from Taiwan to China. It did happen. Number two, the offer by China Energy Fund Committee, the UN-accredited NGO, involved tanks and surveillance equipment. Number three, this is another damning fact about the UN. When Gadio wanted to meet Deby to make the pitch for the Chinese NGO, he was told by a Gadio assistant the best way to do it was in the UN at a special meeting on the Central African Republic. Because what says caring about the Central African Republic more than the provision of tanks and surveillance equipment to Idris Deby? Now, remind yourself, as I remind you, that Mr. Sheikh Gadio became the OIC, the Organization of the Islamic Conference Special Envoy on Chad, on CAR. And yet he used CAR to be pitching tanks and oil deals. Now, they wanted to meet quietly in the village of Idris Deby, which is near the Sudan and Libyan border. They wanted to meet quietly so the competitors didn't see them. They wanted to fly in and get down with the $2 million in cash. The UN-accredited NGO meeting in the UN, meeting at Trump World Tower across the street, cutting the deals that Antonio Guterres now covers up. A man so corrupt as the Secretary General that he's had a year to look into one of his accredited NGOs selling weapons to dictators, and rather than do it, he had the press that asked roughed up and thrown out. Antonio Guterres is corrupt. You heard it here first. Now, Vuk Jeremic is compelling, but even as PGA was cutting deals with Pemex and Potash. So, something is deeply wrong with the UN, and it cannot and has not cleaned itself up. All of these concepts have been polluted here. Sustainable development means tanks. Environmental friendly means surveillance equipment. Leaders mean dictators. And diplomacy means bribery. Now, I have to say this. I do feel bad for Sheikh Gadio. I've got my hat on now. It's cold down here. I feel bad for Sheikh Gadio, and why? Because China Energy Fund Committee was willing to pay cash on the barrel for Vuk Jeremic. They paid him $333 a year, $333,000 a year, and multiple donations to his foundation, his think tank, which was doubling as a travel agency for bribery. But Gadio couldn't get a written agreement, just a commitment that we'd be good in the future. He got $400,000, and now he got arrested. And now, his dreams of being president of Senegal lie on the floor of his own email seeking bribery payments from China for switching from Taiwan. We'll continue in the afternoon, 2:10, to be continued. Okay, the final wind-up after Gadio's testimony. Sorry to do this again, but it keeps freezing up, and it is also freezing out here. Sheikh Gadio testified this afternoon that he had no idea that Patrick Ho and CEFC were going to deliver cash. He had no idea. But he, at the same time, in a series of emails and text messages, even brought up by the prosecution, he was trying to be sure to get to the cash promised to him by CEFC. Don't worry, $100,000. He wanted $100,000 for his conference in Dakar, co-sponsored by François Hollande. He wanted compensation for all of his deep work to put him in contact with Deby. This was arranged through the United Nations at a meeting on CAR. And at the end, to his son, on a text message to his son in Dubai, he said, if they do not pay, we will go to Chad in January and destroy their reputation with Idris Deby. We will destroy their reputation because the president listens to us. In this case, the middleman must be listened to. And so the middleman has turned against the briber. And the question is, what will they do on cross-examination? But what's not in question is that the UN is corrupt and irresponsible to not have audited this one. To be continued.